Hello, hello. Hey, this is Eric Peterson, CTO and founder of CloudZero, coming to you back from the studio again. And today I'm joined with my guest, Mike Surma. Mike, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, and if I could ask, what do you love about CloudZero?
I'm Mike Sarma. I work for Forcepoint, and I'm the director of Cloud FinOps. And what I love about CloudZero, the simplicity of getting data in front of the right people with uh, with little effort on my part to get that to them.
Yeah, let's talk about the right people. Who are the right people to get that data in front of? It's a complicated topic in the world of FinOps, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I think there are two customers in my book for the FinOps data that we manage for the company. One is the engineer or the engineering leaders. And then the other is the finance side of the house and helping them with closing the books and understanding what the data is that they're trying to reconcile each month, which that tends to be the more challenging piece of the workflow, helping them understand the data and getting them to a place where they are able to use the data with little to no intervention from my team.
Ah, that's the best thing when they could just go off and take care of things on their own, right?
Yeah, and in fact, it's something that analytics cranked up to 11 for us
Oh, fantastic.
when that came out. Been doing stuff in a previous version of the tool that we implemented, and it was brittle and manual, and the process took weeks to complete and to get into the hands of accounting, and that's never fun.
So accounting, finance, are they, are they good wizards or bad wizards? They do have this dark art of capability sometimes. You come from an engineering background, right?
Yeah.
And I've always felt like engineering and finance are like two kind of like separated at birth, like children, but they just ended up learning two very different arcane forms of magic. But good magic, bad magic, I don't know. Sometimes,
I think, like, just a recent example of where I kind of fell on my own sword was, exposing invoice numbers to accounting. That proved to be a challenge for them to understand. Like, they saw the numbers and they were like, "Why do I see invoice numbers for last month in this month's data?"
mhm,
And it
yeah.
ended up being a bit of a fire drill, but at the end of the day, we were easily able to explain it. I think, the cost of what we were talking about was, like, dwarfed by the amount of time
Of
and money we
course.
spent to
But it's like
understand it.
accuracy is important, right? It really
Yeah.
matters. So let's talk about the engineers a little bit. I've seen what you and your team have been able to do. You come from that engineering background. You probably have heard me say this a number of times that uh, every engineering decision is a buying decision, right? When you're operating in the cloud, your developers have more power than you might not be aware of, right? And if they can make the right decision, it can make the difference between a profitable system or a mistake. So you guys have done a great job incorporating that. I think even starting to kind of transform your culture a little bit, if I dare say that kind of scary word. But it didn't start out easy, I'm sure. So tell us a little bit about that journey and what it's been like to try to get engineers engaged in this world of FinOps.
The first part of what we needed to do was implement the tool, right? Like, implement CloudZero in our ecosystem. Um, when I joined Forcepoint, they were using a different tool, and very few engineers had access to the tool at that point. Yet the scaffolding was there for us to be able to enable that. And then what we focused on was getting it implemented in our environment where the data that the engineers were consuming meant something to them. And so we started off with some brown bag sessions. Once we had it all wired up and we felt like we were in a place where we could share it with the world, we did the brown bags. And engineers asked some good questions, and they kind of put us on our heels a little bit because we were like, "Oh, wait a minute. What what are we gonna do here? How do we engage them in a meaningful way as opposed to just sharing data that they don't
Yeah.
care about?"
They don't, yeah. Why is it important to them, right?
Right, and so that led us to this, to do some thinking, and the team and I sat down and we were like, "Okay, well, we did the brown bags, those were really successful. How do we increase engagement and drive more kind of interest from the engineering teams?" And so we picked the top 5 cloud spenders in the organization and said, we're gonna set up time with each team. We wanna understand your workflows. We wanna understand how you use the cloud, and how can we help you by providing you with the data about what you're spending in the cloud? And so that came in down to 2 things. One was build dashboards for them, and the other was add a view for them so that they would get anomaly detection in their Slack channels. So we kind of did this twofold approach to really drive adoption, and the folks use it. They ask us questions about it on a regular cadence, and that we one team in particular was very interested in how are RIs saving me money, right? And they're like, show me, create a dashboard for me, and we went down this really deep rabbit hole to show them that yes, you're covered by 90% of your usage is covered. Here are the numbers. This is how much money you would have spent in an on-demand equivalent of what you're using today.
Wow. For them to go in that deep, I mean, that's fantastic. It means they must see some benefit from it. I mean, would you agree with the statement, that a well-architected system is a cost-effective one? Do you see a dependency between those 2 things?
I do. I think that there's an opportunity for plenty of waste, and I think when you think about how you manage how folks often talk about how we manage savings instruments in our ecosystems, we talk about it from a perspective of I want to manage to a percentage of coverage across my fleet, and that's good and bad because you're also covering underutilized resources. If you're running more efficiently, less resources, those dollars you're spending are being used more effectively.
Best way to save money is to not spend it in the first place,
Right.
right? Yeah, yeah, and so getting to that, right data at the right time directly to the engineers that needed it, to the Slack channels, stuff like that. That required, you said you started, talking about, well, first we got to get everything set up and correctly deployed in your environment. I think that taps into something else that is also kind of an unsolved problem in this world, which is a lot of times people don't think about how hard it is to get good allocation, right? Allocation, attribution, organized spend in terms of your business, right? In
Right.
terms of your products, your services, not, hey, we're spending this much money on EC2. It's an interesting but boring metric. I often say, like, what is that going to do for me? But if I can know exactly what I'm spending on product or service, one, I now have this better context of what I'm doing, but that kind of unlocks getting to those individual engineering teams because they're like, well, I'm responsible for that feature. That's how much that feature's costing. So talk to me a little bit about what you saw, as you started to do that. I mean, I know this was a journey for you for a long time, trying to get the spend into the right, P&L or right team or right organization. You saw that across multiple organizations. You know, what was that kind of transformative effect when you started to roll that out at Forcepoint?
I think the thing that we've seen most prevalent in the work that we've done is it's an iterative process.
Mm.
It's not one and done.
Mhm, mhm.
And the challenge with that is that it's a manual process. It's a sit down in a room with a bunch of people,
Hmm,
have a conversation,
right,
and figure out what's wrong.
and it changes,
And,
right?
and it,
And
it
the business
changes.
changes, the business is dynamic, right?
New
Yeah,
things come in, teams go from one
mhm,
department to another department,
yeah,
and they take the things with them.
mhm,
And we don't know that.
yeah, yeah,
Right, and so we had about a 2-month effort over the last few months where we did an account mapping where we took every single account and mapped it to a cost center internally and mapped it to an owner. And so now we've updated all of our dimensions in CloudZero to represent that mapping of our organization, and that's how we do allocations when that we do the P&L.
Now what would that have been like if you had to have done that with tags? Because, like, tags was, like, the only tool that most people had, right? Until something like Dimensions came along.
It would have been virtually impossible.
Yeah. I I think it's interesting, sometimes people go, "Allocation, like, how hard is that? I've got this tagging policies, I'm doing this stuff." I'm like, "How often does your business change its mind? How often do you add a new feature or functionality? How often does somebody move from one team to another and you need to reorganize this stuff?" And also, you got no typos, right? Everything's perfect. You know, it never happens, right? It's
Yeah,
really important to have some sort of abstraction layer there to make it possible so that you can be flexible, right?
agreed.
Yeah. All right. So obviously there's a lot of stuff going on around us here. The cloud is constantly moving. AI is, dominating the conversation these days. Let's talk a little bit about the future real quick and, just kind of think about this um, from a perspective on the future. Like, Mike, you've seen a lot happen in this space. You've been doing it long before I think anybody ever called it FinOps. What do you think the future has entail for for the space for cost optimization as a whole.
I think the thing that we find most challenging, and this was challenging in my previous role and here, and I worked for an observability company in my previous role, so ironic challenge. Um, Getting the usage data, like the usage as in like CPU and memory use by the for the resources that we are provisioning is hard to marry to the cost data. And I think that's an area that I think is starting to come to fruition and be more straightforward to reason about. Um, and then beyond that, I think it's also getting in the pipelines of the engineering teams with a recommendation that's like a pull request and just says that looks at their usage and says you're underutilizing these instances. There's 10% utilization. Here's a recommendation for an instance right sizing and a
But right
PR
right
with
place at the right time in their development workflow,
yeah,
right? Not
exactly,
some outside external process.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're gonna make that happen for you. So, Mike, I wanna thank you for coming out and spending time with me, having this quick conversation today. It was awesome as always. I know we're gonna do stuff like this, again, and every chance we get, but I really wanna thank you for your time. Thank you for being a great customer, and, really appreciate it. So, anyways, that's all for now. Mike and Eric, we're out. Have fun. Stay safe in the cloud.